You know what? Reading is actually one of the harder examinations in the OET. So a lot of people are interested to find out if this examination is going to be easier when it's taken on the computer compared to when they're sitting the examination on paper. So today we're going to address that problem and we're going to figure out whether this examination, OET on computer reading test, is much better than the paper edition of OET. My name is Brian. I'm still your lecturer for today's lesson, and I'm one of the lecturers of 9.09er English. Let's dive right into OET reading on computer versus OET reading on paper. The first thing that you need to understand about the written examination, particularly OET on paper, is that it's a very taxing examination. The written examination will take roughly 3 hours, and there will be a three-part examination, a battery of tests, and you don't really have a break in between the tests. So it can be a little bit frustrating, a little bit upsetting, and very, very tiring. Now, people who are thinking of taking the OET on computer examination actually are of the impression that it's going to be better because it's just, in front of the computer. So it's probably a lot easier compared to when you're going to write on a page. But I would have to say that it's not really the case when it comes to OET on computer because after your listening examination, usually you only have 1 minute to read through the instructions for the reading examination before it starts. So it means to say there's not really a lot of gap between the reading examination and the listening examination, unlike when you're taking OET on paper. Let me explain that in a bit. OET on paper actually gives you some time for you to prepare for the next examination, not necessarily as part of the schedule for the test, but during the time when the papers are going to be given to you. Because as you would probably know, the OET on paper examination requires test papers to be handed out to each candidate one by one. No, it's not get one and pass. You're not going to get the test questionnaire and pass it to the person behind you. The papers are going to be distributed one by the invigilators on the floor. Plus, you're going to get instructions from the proctor as well. So during that time, it might not be a very long amount of time. It might be a very brief reprieve. You can actually relax for a bit and compose yourself and put yourself in the right state of mind to tackle your reading examination. You don't get that opportunity when you're taking OET on computer because you'll just have 1 minute to read through the instructions and the exam automatically starts. You will proceed right away to part A. Although you will be reminded that part A starts as soon as you click next or as soon as 1 minute is over, you will definitely not have enough preparation time to put yourself in the right disposition to just relax, meditate, and perhaps be able to prepare yourself for what's going to happen when you take the reading examination on the computer. So I think in that regard, it is very important that you're familiar with the test format for OET so that you know what to expect and exactly what's going to happen during the test. So you will not panic during your examination. Now, perhaps the difference is after the first part of your examination, which is part A, the first section of your test, you have a 10-minute optional scheduled break for OET on computer. You don't get that when you're taking OET on paper. So, although you don't really have a gap between listening and reading for OET on computer, you will have a 10-minute optional scheduled break when you're done with part A of the test. Because when you're taking OET on paper, you can take breaks in between part B and part C of your examination, somewhere in between, probably. During that time, you can actually go to the restroom if you want to, or you can have a break if you want to. But every trip outside the testing area is going to be time deducted from your total amount of time for the reading examination. So you will not actually get to pause the time when you go out and have a break. The time still keeps on running, so you lose time if you go to the restroom. Now, the difference here is when you're taking OET on computer, you actually have an optional scheduled break that you can take in between part A and part B and C of your test. So that's going to be very convenient, at least for people who want or enjoy having breaks in between tests. Also, one thing that you need to understand about the reading examination on computer is that it's not like the paper delivered format in which you have the two sheets of paper, your test booklet and the text booklet and the question paper open right in front of you. You will have a split screen. On the left side, you will be seeing the passages, and on the right hand panel, you will be seeing the questions. You can scroll them, okay? You can scroll either panels independently. So if you want to scroll the left hand side first, you can do so, and then you can scroll the right hand side as well. If you are the kind of person who wants to scroll very quickly and you're getting impatient using the scrolling function tool, then you can actually use the hand icon. The hand icon can be found on the top left part of the screen, and all you need to do is to click it, and you can grab the entire screen and scroll the page faster than when you're using the scroll function tools. So that's very convenient when you're taking OET on computer. Nevertheless, you have to understand that you are only given a highlight function tool for the OET on computer. You cannot write notes on the computer screen. Unlike when you're taking OET on paper, you can highlight, encircle, underline, or probably write notes around the right hand margin of the question paper just to focus on the right keywords that will help you to get the right answers. Here, there is a highlight function tool in this part of the test, which you can use to mark important keywords and phrases, although note taking is not allowed when you're taking OET on computer because you can't write on the screen. Now, for those people who experience so much strain when they're looking at very small fonts on the computer screen, there's actually an advantage that you're going to get when you're taking OET on computer, because you have the plus icon, which you can use to make the text larger. And if you feel that you're not comfortable with larger fonts, you can alternatively use the negative symbol to make the font a little bit smaller. So you have full control over the size of the font that you're going to look at and read in your OET reading test on computer. Now, at this point, I would like to jump right into the different parts of the examination. And I would like to start with part A of the reading test. In this first part of the test, you know that you're going to have to answer 20 items, and you will have to source all of your answers from 4 different selections. That's also very similar when you're taking OET on computer. The first part of the test is going to be laid out in a very similar fashion to that of your OET on paper test. The first few items are going to be in the multiple choice format, however. Typically, when you're taking the paper, the delivered format of OET, that's going to be more of a matching type kind of question in which you're supposed to write the letter of the paragraph or the selection that contains the information that is being presented in the first 7 or 6 items of the test. Now, here, you don't actually have to write the letter of the passage where you can see the information, the question. Instead, it's going to be laid out in a multiple choice question. So which passage contains this information? And you have A, B, C, and D. Now, it is advised that in part A of your examination, you leave the two panels open while you're taking the test, because it's very obvious. If you close one panel, it's going to be hard for you to find the answers to the questions in a very expedient manner. So just leave the two windows open, or the two screens, the split screen open, side by side, so that you can get the answers more efficiently. Now you have to use the cursor and click on an item to write your answer, or press the tab key to jump from one item to another. This is very similar to your listening examination. So just in case you want to jump from one question to another, you can actually use the tab key, or you can hover on the screen and click on the item that you wish to answer for that particular item. You get a 5-minute warning before the end of the test. And this is very identical to the paper delivered format, in which the proctor is going to warn you if you only have 5 minutes remaining time. So in the computer delivered format, it will not be any different from when you're taking OET on paper. Now, jumping right into the optional break, you can take it after part A of your test. It's an optional scheduled break, but remember, it's not really for 10 minutes, because you will still have to go through the security checks. So you will have to make sure that you're back in the testing room before the 10-minute optional break lapses. So probably have a break for right about 7 or 8 minutes, and then make sure that you're walking to your testing room or back into your testing area for about a couple of minutes before the next part of the examination starts, because you will still have to run through the same security checks that you've done before you took your examination. After the optional scheduled break, you're going to jump right into part B of your examination, and it's very similarly laid out as well as your OET on paper. Each item has a separate tab, so this means that there's no scrolling required here. You don't have to scroll up and down to see all of the questions in part B. Every item has a separate tab. And highlighting the text is also allowed in this part of the examination. It's possible both for the question and also for the answer options. Now, just like in your listening examination, there's the strikeout function tool, although as I've mentioned a while ago and in the previous lesson, this is actually not necessary. If you feel that you do not want to use the strikeout function tool, that's perfectly fine. Just click on your selected option, and it highlights yellow, and that confirms that that's the answer that you have selected for part B of your examination. Just a refresher, part B of the examination is where you're going to receive a passage, and it's going to contain information in the healthcare context or healthcare workplace setting, and you will have to answer a question, just a single question, for every one of those short passages in the healthcare context. Now, jumping right into the hardest part of your examination, which is part C, we're going to discuss very briefly what this is all about. Part C is where you're going to have a more comprehensive passage, and it's actually quite lengthy. You will have a couple of passages to read in part C, and you will have to answer a few questions about those passages. Remember that part C is not really a test that assesses your ability to locate answers, because part C questions will already tell you where you're going to find the answers. Part C is a test of your comprehension. So let's try to analyze whether the OET on computer format, or the computer delivered format of OET, is going to help you to comprehend the passage much better and find the correct answers much more easily. In part C of your examination, the text can be seen on the left-hand side, just like in part A actually, whereas the questions can be found on the right-hand panel. You may use the hand icon as well here, just to scroll very quickly and grab the text so that it's more quickly scrolled up or down. And you can also make the text larger or smaller using the plus or minus symbols. It's also very important, just like in part A of the test, to leave both windows or both panels open side by side. Do not touch anything that will close the windows, because that's going to be a complete disaster in your test. Make sure that they're open side by side. And if you want to highlight, there's the highlight function tool, which may be used both on the questions and the options. There's also the strikeout function tool that you can use, but this is optional. But once again, one of the disadvantages is you can't write on the screen, or you can't type your notes on the screen, just in case you're the kind of person who likes to jot down important details. It's not possible when you're taking OET on the computer. So in essence, or in summary, I would have to say that there are not really a lot of differences between OET on computer and OET on paper when it comes to the reading test. I think it all boils down to what you're more comfortable taking. Are you more comfortable looking at a sheet of paper right in front of you side by side? Or are you more comfortable looking at the computer screen, increasing the font size as you like, or perhaps finding the answers by scrolling up and down the windows that are in front of you on the computer? If you are the kind of person who's more traditional and you prefer flipping pages back and forth, then perhaps the paper delivered format is the right choice for you. But if you're the kind of person who has been accustomed to using the computer every single day of your life and you don't really get eye strain very easily, then the computer delivered format might be a better option. But also do take into account the optional schedule break that you have, because that is very important for some people. Having a breather in between the examination is sometimes very helpful for some candidates to liven their spirits and keep them motivated, whereas others might want to gain momentum and hold on to the momentum, so they don't want to have breaks in between. So, uh, different folks, different strokes. People have different preferences and different abilities. So it will all boil down to what you prefer at the end of the day, and which one is going to be more convenient and more comfortable for you to take. So that's it for this lesson. See you in the next videos, and where we're going to talk about the rest of the uh, parts of your examination. We still have writing and speaking up next. So I hope to see you in the next videos in this series. Once again, my name is Brian. I shall see you in the next one. Bye, guys.